Peter King has Will Anderson coming to Detroit. Nick Baumgardner joins us on a Tuesday. Locked on Lions.
You are Locked on Lions, your daily Detroit Lions podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's good, everybody? Matt Dery with you. It is a Tuesday episode of Locked on Lions right here on the Locked on Podcast Network. Tuesday, April 25th and a Wednesday, April 26th. The Athletics' Nick Baumgardner will join us coming up momentarily. Again, he writes for theathletic.com, does a great job covering the draft, the college game, the pro game. We'll get Nick's thoughts on what the Lions are going to do at 6, 18, and also in the second round. We also got to discuss Peter King's mock draft a little bit from Pro Football Talk and all of that, the Football Morning in America column. We'll get to that momentarily. But folks, we are 2 days away. 2 days away from the draft. So exciting. Can't wait. You can follow us on Twitter at Dery Speaks, at Locked on Lions on Twitter, the Matt Dery Facebook fan page. And of course, check us out wherever you get your podcasts. And also, free and subscribing. You can subscribe on the Locked on Lions YouTube channel. Thank you for doing that, making us your first listen. And of course, we're your team every day. We're here each and every day talking about the Detroit Lions. I promised you yesterday on Mock Draft Monday that we were done with mock drafts, but I thought Peter King had a very interesting column in his Football Morning in America piece that came out yesterday. He's got the Lions at number 6 taking Will Anderson, edge rusher from Alabama, with Jalen Carter going off the board to Seattle at 5 and Tyree Wilson going number 2 to Houston. I think this would be a monster break for the Lions to get Will Anderson. I've seen some Will Anderson slander out there, but he didn't really have a great season this past year, and he lucked into some sacks and everything else. But as Peter King wrote, quote, most interesting quote from a GM in the market for an edge rusher, Tyree Wilson's a swing for the fences, Will Anderson's a solid double, end quote. Imagine putting Will Anderson from Alabama on the other side of Aiden Hutchinson. Sign me up. I am all for it. At 18, Peter King takes Deonte Banks, the cornerback from Maryland, and writes, quote, storyline I would urge you not to buy. With the gambling suspension of Jamison Williams, look for the Lions to consider seriously dive into the receiver market here. Nope. Once the Lions found out the ban would be for 6 weeks, they figured they wouldn't upset their draft plans and take a wideout early. After jettisoning Jeff Okudah to Atlanta pre-draft, the rising Banks is a strong candidate here, end quote. I want to get Nick Baumgardner's thoughts on Deonte Banks. We'll do that coming up. I would have no issue at all with Will Anderson at 6 and Deonte Banks at 18. I wouldn't at all. You're adding more defense. Do I think the Lions need to get a receiver at some point in this draft? Yes. Would Osiris Torrance fit at 18 or another offensive lineman? Absolutely. But Banks is a really good football player too. And I don't think the Lions would go wrong. If they could get Will Anderson at 6, we'll all jump for joy. I just think he's a really special player. Yeah. Was he better 2 years ago than this past year? Sure. But he's a really, really good player. And I think teams would be stupid to pass on Will Anderson that high in the draft. All right. Nick Baumgardner from The Athletic is going to join us coming up next. Love talking to Nick. We're going to do that. Got to tell you about FanDuel, of course, the official sports betting partner of the Locked On Podcast Network and the NFL. We got NHL playoffs heating up. We got Canadian bacon with Mraz. We've got the NBA playoffs going on right now. LeBron and his theatrics last night. No better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. That's because right now FanDuel is giving new customers a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and sign up today to claim your no-sweat first bet. You can wager on anything you want. Seriously, don't miss your chance at that no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. Make every moment more with FanDuel. All right, here we are, folks, 2 days before the draft. Nick Baumgardner of theathletic.com, who has written so many pieces and has collaborated, of course, with Colton Pouncey as well, who covers the Lions. We had Colton on last week. Always respect Nick's opinions, love the analysis he does on these college players, and he joins us today here on the show. Nick, great to see you.
What's up, man? How we doing?
Good, buddy. Good, buddy. You and I were talking before I hit record about my Kalijah Cansey pick, and
That's right.
You're backing me. I appreciate that.
Well, hey, look, I mean, you explained. I don't know if I'm backing you, but you explained it. You explained it, and I heard you out because, look, like I'm not going to take Kalijah Cansey there. I don't think in this draft, but like the situation is that if you don't want a corner, then you're not going to take Jalen Carter, and the board falls the way it's probably going to fall, one way or the other. I mean, some things could happen, but what are you going to do? And that's the rub. Colton and I took a corner, as people know. So, it's a lot of people don't like that. They just, that's not their bag. And I get it. But it's also kind of like, if you finish with 2 picks in that first round and that's it, or if you trade back in, it just get 2 good players, get 2 starters and move on. And I think that's where you're at because they're good enough now to just add pieces and then go compete. And I think that's what I like about this.
What do you honestly think is going to happen in 2 nights? Like, if you had to, put money, we don't want to put money down because, 222 Rod Wood Drive.
We can't do that.
Is now 222 Las Vegas Boulevard after last week.
That's right.
And Jamison Williams is on Instagram at the fight the other night in Vegas. Like, dude, what are you doing?
Give it a night off, JMO. What are you doing?
But if you're a betting man, Nick, what's going to happen in 2 nights in 48 hours?
So, I think Bryce Young's going to go 1 and start the whole thing there. And what the Texans do is still sort of up in the air. I would take Stroud. I would just take the quarterback. I could understand why they won't. They have so many more things that they need to fix. They could wait a year and all this. But I would take Stroud. And then 3 is where I wonder what sort of happens. Are the Cardinals open for business if that, in fact, happens? That's where I've talked about. If you're the Lions, do you call them and try to get up there for Will Anderson or, Wilson if you like him better? But I would probably like Anderson. So I guess the big question for me is, are there going to be 2 or 3 quarterbacks in the top 4? I really think it's going to be – I think it should be 3, but it might be 2, and that's going to leave you at a really weird spot. So I think either way, the Lions are more than likely, and it's probably not by a wide margin – going to be in the situation we just talked about. Like, it's either Jalen Carter or a corner. I don't know if Wilson's going to make it. I don't think Anderson's going to make it. And that's really all we're talking about. They're not taking a quarterback. So, that's sort of the situation you're in. And I guess you're hoping that maybe somebody falls and you can trade it. And I guess that's probably the biggest thing you're looking at right now.
Where you guys obviously did mock Witherspoon.
We took Gonzalez, and people were like, "What are you doing?"
Well, that was my question. Was Gonzalez and Witherspoon?
Right.
You guys have gone back and forth now for a few weeks in your pieces about those guys. But what made you do that?
Yeah, they're so close, and it's interesting, especially with those two, because they're 2 different players. And I think that Witherspoon, so many people like him because he's intense and he's a dog, as they say. He's Aaron Glenn kind of guy, right? I think he fits everything that Aaron Glenn wants to be about, everything Jeff Okudah wasn't, right? Like, and this is that type of guy, that type of confident athlete. But then again, Gonzalez is a better athlete. He's pretty confident in his own right. He's quieter, I suppose, but I think he's the better overall player and probably the better piece long-term because I don't think I'm drafting too many guys just because Aaron Glenn, and I would trust Aaron Glenn's opinion, but Brad Holmes is going to be here for the long haul, and Aaron Glenn is, if they win a playoff game or make the playoffs, Aaron Glenn's out of here. So I think that Gonzalez for me is the best corner on the board. I would be very comfortable putting him in with everybody that they've, signed and added in recent months and all this, and but I would prefer an edge, I guess, is what I would land on. So that's where I'm at with it.
Nick Baumgardner with us from theathletic.com. When you talk about trading back, I mean, will Tennessee, will Washington, would you think some of these teams are moving up to get Richardson? Or do you think, I think the Colts are taking Levis if he's there over Richardson just based on their history.
Right.
But How do you kind of view that?
Yeah, I mean that's a big question, and it could be either or, right? Like, do you like Levis or Richardson? It's one of the two, especially. And if CJ falls, then you're in even more business possibly. And I've wondered that for some time. And Washington has been so weird. I was there at the combine when Ron Rivera was trying to tell us all how much Eric Bieniemy loved Sam Howell coming out of the draft, and I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, okay, yeah, the Chiefs loved Sam Howell. I got it, right? So I don't know what they're really doing. I don't know if they're trying to like lay low and make a move or wait till next year. They've been somebody I've thought about for Levis or Richardson. Tennessee, of course, sitting there as another one. And I just still will not rule out Atlanta. I know that they've talked about Desmond Ridder like he's their guy, but I mean, I don't know if I see the same thing, and I don't know if I believe him. So, like, I'm not so totally sold that they're going to pass either.
You mentioned before about Gonzalez and Witherspoon, and just having this cornerback conversation, and I talked about it on the show yesterday. Where would they play this season? I get the whole argument of,
Yeah,
well, they only have Sutton and Lucas under contract beyond this season at corner, but Will Harris, Jerry Jacobs, Gardner Johnson, Mosley. I mean, you drafting a kid at 6 to play corner that might not be on the field? I have a hard time believing that.
I think he would be on the field, and I think that would be more of a situation. Of course, there'd be pressure there, right? You'd have to throw him into a pretty contested mix. I think he would be on the field, but I think in a lot of ways, like we've seen with these Lions guys, especially the young guys, they wouldn't overwhelm them. I think it would be like last year. Aiden Hutchinson's probably the one guy, and Sewell. But so many of these other rookies, they've been able to like ease in, and I think they've been better for it. Kirby Joseph was that way, so. Yeah, I think he'd get in there, but that's a good point. They have a lot of guys, with this. It's kind of like, plays just like, I don't know. It's a tough one.
When folks talk about this, they say, well, what quarterbacks did he really go up against this year? And obviously in the game against Michigan in your backyard, that was not McCarthy's best game per se, but when you watch the tape on Witherspoon, is that fair to say that he went up against a lousy crop of Big Ten quarterbacks?
So, he did have to play Ohio State, and he did have to play McCarthy, and like you said, it wasn't McCarthy's best day, but he probably had something to do with that a little bit, I'd say. And I do think that's a valid thing that isn't brought up probably enough, because one thing that the Witherspoon truthers or defenders or what I want to say come out with is he's often graded higher in a lot of the efficiency metrics and things like that. Because I think if you look at the quarterbacks that Gonzalez was facing in the Pac-12 and the offenses more specifically, that's really what it is, Matt. Like, he's not facing Witherspoon's facing a pretty easy offensive slate there outside of Ohio State, Michigan, maybe if Purdue wants to have a nice day, but I think that definitely is part of it when I look at the whole picture.
The slander that's out there now on Will Anderson and Stroud, both, which is the more unfair in your mind right now?
What's the slander on Anderson?
Well,
exactly.
I just heard Greg Cosell the other day say, he's not that high of an impact guy.
Oh boy. Yeah. Okay. I get what you're saying. Yeah. No, that's more the slander on Stroud. I think that's an overreaction, but I can at least understand it because they're panicking about the S2 scores and the cognitive leaks. And, you could watch CJ's tape and say, yeah, he's got a little bit of that Fields. He would stand there in the pocket too long or hold the ball too long and not get rid of it. But Anderson, man, I think he gets dinged because 2 years ago he had that ridiculous season that was probably more productive than It was more productive than what Hutchinson did at Michigan, for crying out loud. And Anderson was like a sophomore. And then last year, when he's got all the attention and he's getting the Bosa treatment from all these guys who all know he's going to be the number one pick in the draft, and we're all trying to make our name on him and we're chipping him and his numbers go down. And he plays at Bama. Like that's not – if you're a superstar on Alabama's defense, and the same thing goes for Brian Branch, then you're really good. If you can make it through all of that talent and all of the BS that Saban puts those guys through and come out the other side and still be a star, then I usually bet on that defender to do really big things. I think that's Will Anderson all the way.
A lot of talk with Nick about number 6. Let's get into number 18 a little bit. And, of course, Friday and Saturday, too. We'll do that coming up next. Nick Baumgardner with us from The Athletic. Does a fantastic job. Miss him covering U of M because I thought he was the best there, but he's awesome with The Athletic. We love having him on the show here on Locked On Lions, a little Tuesday edition. We are 48 hours away from the draft.
Oof.
All right, Nick. So at 18, I know you mocked, you did your mock, but how will it play out, do you think?
Yeah.
And what guys that you think would be sitting at 18 that Brad Holmes would run the card up for?
Yeah, this is one where I'm really interested to see if there's a trade market here. Like I'm curious to see if the tight end group does anything or if the receiver group does anything. Because I'm not sold that we're going to see a receiver go before 15. I think we're going to wait a second there. And if the Lions are holding a card, and you got all the receivers there and all those tight ends, and it's an elite tight end group, that's for real. Maybe like if Dallas or New York or the Chargers wants to jump up. That's what I've been really curious about, because I would love to do that if I'm them. Get off that pick, just get one more, because you're going to get a starter one way or the other somewhere in the 20s, and you're going to get another one with the addition to it. But if they were to stick, that's where it's like, Cansey's still there. Would they like the length? I don't know, but I think he'd work well with McNeil. Miles Murphy, I think, is going to be there. If you don't want to take a corner, I think you got Deonte Banks, the kid from Maryland. I like him a lot. I think he's worthy of that spot. And then one guy that we actually took in our mock on a trade down, but I'd probably take him at 18 is Brian Brisset from Clemson. And I got a lot of the jokes, that right up Holmes's alley, a defensive lineman with injury history and all this. I'm like, hey, look, I got it. Yeah. But I think there's a lot of talent here with that kid. And he's been down on a lot of boards for production and the injury. And, his younger sister passed away last year and he had to deal with that. It's been a rough 3 years, but all reports are that he works his butt off, and I think he's got that edge that he'd fit really well here. I would look for him somewhere too if he's still on the board.
It's interesting because with Brisset, he was a top 10 guy in a lot of mocks in November and December, and he's kind of fallen off a little bit.
Big time. Yeah.
But he kind of fits that Dan Campbell, Brad Holmes mold.
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so we'll have to see about that. You said you like Banks, the corner from Maryland. Any chance he slips to round 2 if they don't get a corner before that?
Yeah, I don't think so. Like I'd almost rather be, or not rather, but I'd almost be more worried that he wouldn't be there at 18 than he would to fall out. I think he's a legit first rounder. Like I think Forbes and Clark Phillips would be there in round 2. And that's the other thing to bring up. If you don't want to take a corner at either spot, because that's, certainly on the table for them if they don't want to. You got guys like Darius Rush, the kid from South Carolina, who's really, really good. DJ Turner, kid here at Michigan, who ran that 4.2. I mean, he's a good football player. Those are guys that are going to be there in the second round. Forbes, Cam Smith. It's a deep corner class. So I understand the hesitation from people who are like, I don't want to do, even though Gonzalez or Witherspoon would be the best in the group, I get why people are like, I'd rather wait. Because Banks is, he's a really good player too. If you got him at 18, pretty good ad.
All right, so Jamison Williams is going to sit out the first 6 games. That means there's more of an issue now, or there's more of a urgency now to get a receiver. I mean, Quintez Cephas is now off the team.
Yeah, he's out. Right.
Yeah, who do you like at 18? You mentioned some receivers falling. There's a big crop of guys right in that area.
Right.
Who's your guy you like?
So in that chunk there, I wouldn't, if I'm the Lions. My favorite of the whole group is Smith and Jigba. He's my guy from the whole. That he's just the most unique of the whole bunch. He can be too expensive for Detroit. I wouldn't do that because I think you can get, if you're the Lions, really good value in the second or third. You've got guys like Zay Flowers, Josh Downs. They're like oddly sized, or they're a little small, we'll say, but whatever. They make plays and they get up near. A.T. Perry, who's a big X receiver from Wake Forest, who I think is going to be there a little later. Cedric Tillman, Jalen Hyatt, the kids from Tennessee. I mean, shoot, if you wanted to wait, Matt, and call Jaden Reed from Michigan State, there's a lot of guys like that really do fit. And I think just get a couple of pros in here, that's what you really need, because you got Williams and you're hoping he becomes like the firework guy, like the big take the top off and everything else. And to me, St. Brown is like the definition of a professional football player. Like he's just so good at everything he does. If you get one more guy like that's a little bit bigger, maybe in those middle rounds, I'd like that. You got Michael Wilson from Stanford, could be one of those type of guys. There's a lot of guys in there.
You look at the Lion roster and you go, all right, they've been lathering up Vaitai for the last few weeks and saying how good he looks.
Again,
and how his teammates love him. Decker was saying that.
He is a great guy. But yeah, I get it.
but it's like, what about right guard? I took Torrance. I traded up to take Torrance in the lockdown mock, but Could Osiris be 18, or is there a name we're forgetting right now?
Yeah, I wouldn't take Osiris at 18, but I would look at guys like Chandler Zavala down there in the second. I don't know if I would take the one thing that has come up is if you go back to 6 and like, would you take Peter Skoronsky?
Yeah.
Would you, because he's a guard and a tackle. And when we talk about the dream scenario of whenever Taylor Decker's done, whether that be he plays until he retires or he's just plays until he can't, go and the Lions move on, Sewell moves or you have the next guy there with him. You have 2 future, stud tackles. I do not hate that idea. And I wouldn't rule something like that out. That would be the only thing I would do, though, offensive line-wise, probably in the first round. Otherwise, I'd probably wait because I think you can get some pretty good guards that would fit, right in there between 2 great players. That's the thing to remember. The guy's going to slide between Ragnow and Sewell. He doesn't have to be perfect.
No.
He just has to be breathing, some ways, right?
And I'll tell you this: we had Steve Avila on the show Friday.
I love him.
What a great kid!
Yeah,
He's
I
awesome.
love that guy. If he was there in the second round, that would be one that I would definitely consider. You got guys like Cody Maw, but Avila is one of my favorites in the whole draft. I mean, he's just, I think he played 5 spots at TCU.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a legit dude.
What about tight end? Kincaid, Mayer, where do you stand on those guys?
Yeah, so I think that I wouldn't do the tight end for the Lions at 18. That's because, again, I think that there's more depth there. I think it'll sort out. Kincaid and Mayer will be 1 and 2 in some capacity, and then we'll see if Musgrave or Darnell Washington slips into the first round. I don't think it'll be both, maybe neither. And I do think when Detroit comes back up in the second, unless they add or move around, they could get one of those guys. If they, Darnell Washington feels like a great fit here. From everything he could give you in the run game. I think he's a more valuable pass catcher than a lot of people seem to think because of his athletic testing. But man, he's like Dan Campbell, when he was a player. That's what it reminds me of. And I got to think that Dan Campbell has seen that, and those guys have noticed that, and they have value they have roles for a guy like that. So I've looked at him a lot, and I think he'd be the best fit of that whole group.
All right, final thing, Nick. You know it's coming. Quarterback. What do you think? I mean, day 3, and is there a guy you like that later on that you could develop here? I know it's never been the Lions' MO, but here we are.
No, it's definitely time to do it. I mean, right? It needs to happen. It needs to happen. I think the original thought was maybe you can get Hendon Hooker in the 3rd round, and the dream, he can be your quality backup who develops into a low-key start. I don't think that's going to happen. He's going to go too early. But I look at guys like Clayton Tune from Houston, who's an athletic passer who can get better and could do some different things, or Dorian Thompson-Robinson, the kid from UCLA, who can run around and do some different things. It gives you a different look. It's not just if Goff gets hurt, who can come in and help you get to the next level. I think sometimes the Lions give up a lot by not having that athletic quarterback on the roster on the scout team. And it's take a guy who's different and can make, they talked to Teddy Bridgewater, right? Okay, if you want to pay Teddy a lot of, on a deal, fine. But if you want to go down there and get one of these young guys, there's some good quality players in this draft that are going to be good backups. And I think that they need to do that. I think that that's something that needs to be addressed in this draft.
Nick, always love checking in with you. Thanks for coming on today.
Anytime, bud.
Nick Baumgardner with us. Read him at The Athletic, theathletic.com. Follow him on Twitter at Nick Baumgardner. That's our Tuesday edition of Locked On Lions.